Did you know that it took about 20 to 30 years for cars to become mainstream and replace horses as the main way to travel? The transition between horses to cars disrupted many industries at the time. It required a change of mindset, infrastructures, behavior, procedures, and so much more. Does that sound familiar to you right now? Those who didn't adapt were left behind and forced to jump on the bandwagon much, much later. Well, today I've got the pleasure of discussing the current transition that is pretty much rocking the entire world with Darcy Boles. Darcy is one of Remote Hub's top 50 future work thought leaders and a true architect of company culture. I've known Darcy for a couple of years and I've enjoyed getting to know her through her posts on LinkedIn and other platforms. And I've always wanted to discuss this transition, especially this idea of employee experience. If you've never heard of that, well, you're at the right place. And also to start looking at the impact that this transition has on startups and innovation. Welcome to the Mary Poppins of Startups live show. Yes, we're rebranding. More on that later. I'm Naili Makangu, the founder of Athena Leaders, an organization that is dream, build, and play whilst leaving behind a legacy of a happy and productive workplace playground. For those who are new to the show, we have 3 rules. Number 1, if you have any questions, we've got Darcy here with us. Please put it in the chat and we will answer live. Number 2, do you know anyone that can help startups and organizations navigate the future of work or just create their product and launch new ideas? Well, get them to reach out to us. Number 3, more importantly, relax and have fun. Darcy, welcome to the show. I'm really, really excited about having this conversation with you. As I said before, we've kind of known each other before, but now I actually get the chance to ask you all of the burning questions that I've been storing up over the last couple of years. First, let's start by warming the audience by giving us your thoughts on the current state of affairs when it comes to hybrid and remote, and we will go way deeper after this.
Hi, Niley. I'm so excited to be here. I mean, as you said, we've known each other for a long time via LinkedIn and through a lot of networks, and I'm just really thrilled to be here. So thank you so much for having me. The current state of work and kind of the situation that I see so many companies in, I think is one of that a gentleman named Paul, I'm so sorry, I can't remember his last name on LinkedIn, called Shybrid. And I think that we are kind of falling into, as a society, into the companies don't know how to go hybrid or how to go fully remote, and people still have leases on buildings, and half the employee workforce isn't comfortable or doesn't want to come back in the office. And we're kind of teetering between this time and space of either gung-ho forward, we're gonna do this, we're committing, we're gonna reorganize our entire company and how we do things, which is what you need to do to be successful in the future of work. And kind of people who are falling back into old habits, or maybe their identity is really tied to the office and they aren't willing to let that go, which is okay as well. But I think we're hitting that point just as a society and work right now where the decision needs to be made soon, whether you're going to shift the mindset and really dive into the future of work, or kind of stick to the things you've been doing and go back to the office, which is okay, I guess. I think there's pros and cons to both, but I think really in a societal level, we're just hitting that breaking point.
Yeah, and I guess you've mentioned the identity of companies, and I guess this is one of the things that really worries a company. What do you see the impact of the indecision is having on companies' identity at the moment?
I think many companies are realizing that they actually never knew who they were. And I think that is a really fascinating concept to think about. There's a container in which the office has held a lot of behaviors, a lot of expectations, a lot of just frankly how people worked. And, we're hearing and I've said this before in many publications, but remote doesn't kill culture, it reveals it. And people are they're going remote, they're saying, "Oh, this doesn't work." And it actually isn't that it doesn't work. It's just that it hasn't been designed for that environment. Yeah.
And I love that. I love that quote. Remote doesn't kill culture. It reveals it. I mean, you're completely right. The number of times someone comes and says, "Well, my boss is sending me messages every 5 minutes now that we're remote." My question is always, "How are you working before? Maybe he was just
Right.
by your desk every 5 minutes, right?"
Yeah.
So I guess, could you please, especially for those who've never met you, could you please share with us your own personal journey so that we can kind of understand your passion for this area?
Yeah. So I have a lot of different angles that I've kind of taken to get to where I am today. And I guess I'll start with the hospitality lens. So throughout my life, I've always been very curious. I've been fortunate to travel a lot over the world and work in really high end restaurants and hotels. And I really loved learning from the experience that we would give a guest in a hotel or a restaurant, like that that basically profession of being a host. And so I actually started working at Airbnb, and that took me through all over the world and being able to create experiences on the experiences platform, which was incredible. And I learned from one of my mentors, what if being a host was like an actual profession within the workplace? And so when I had the opportunity to join a fully remote company at 25 people as the head of employee experience, I kind of said, can we look at can we look at the employee experience like a concierge service? Can we give the employees that warm welcome so they feel comfortable? The pillows are good. They know where the best restaurants are. They know where the bathrooms are. You kind of have to orient people when they're traveling to a different culture, a different location. It's a very similar concept in how I look at the employee experience. Is I actually have to help teach people these cultural norms, the behaviors that are, accepted here or might not be. You go to Japan and it's custom to bow and take your shoes off. But you don't know that unless you read about it. And it's the same thing with remote company culture. How do I know if it's okay to have my dog behind me on the screen or my baby on my lap or whatever it might be? Unless you tell me that, or you create a culture that is actually showing me and telling me the behaviors in which you can thrive in this environment. So that's a little bit how I got into kind of the employee experience realm. And kind of just the remote in general. I've never fit into a box. I'm a highly sensitive person. I have a host of mental health kind of issues that as a lot of us do, and struggle pretty severely with anxiety and OCD. And it was really hard for me to go into an office every day. It was really hard for me to commute. Mornings are a little bit more difficult for me than the average bear, just with my brain. And so being able to be in an environment and with a group of people who really believed in designing your life around your work versus your work around your life, that doesn't mean we're not working a lot. It doesn't mean that I'm not getting stuff done, but there's just a different cadence in which my brain tends to function a little bit better if I'm on my own schedule.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really important. And I really relate to that in terms of this idea of working in places where you can fit your work around the schedule. I believe in being a early morning person, and the afternoon is not the best time for me. When I've got flexibility to work around it, I can do exactly the same amount of work, but broken down in different chunks of the day and work through meetings, which I think is something that people lose when they have this rigidity. Now, one thing, like you said, one thing that is interesting when some people really start thinking about this idea of flexibility is people are not going to work. How do you make sure, or whenever you are creating that experience, that people understand the boundaries within which they can play at work?
Yeah, I mean, the way that I've coined it and coined it with my teams in the past is you must create the framework so there's freedom within it. So what's the freedom within the framework and really where are those swim lanes? And that really comes down to documentation and expectation. And there's a cycle that I see a lot of companies starting to invest in, but I'm not sure if kind of the majority realizes how important employer branding is in kind of writing down that internal culture, those internal behaviors, and then making sure that that is represented through the hiring process, through the interview process, on company job pages. And what that does, it really creates a mirror back into the company to make sure that we're all holding each other accountable for this framework. So let's just say sometimes freedom can, in terms of like flexibility from an hourly perspective, can be really difficult for customer facing teams. That's a reality, right? So are there some really creative solutions the company can do to say, okay, we are going to have 4-hour time blocks where people are scheduled, and guess what, you get to choose that 4-hour time block, and we'll hire specifically for people who might work better in the morning or in the evening, right? There's a lot we can do to wrap around kind of this role crafting that just takes a little bit more intention, but it's totally possible. So I get a little frustrated when I hear, oh, customer facing teams can't do that. There's no reason that we can't be scheduling people to do that. It's just a matter of creating the framework and setting the expectation.
That's very true, actually, because a lot of people are so caught up on this idea of you're either hybrid or remote, and they forget this idea of just walk beyond the word and what it's meant to be, and start looking at what flexibility and how you can do that. So, as you said, customer service offering the different slots to help people, own their time and their way of working would be a really good idea. Now, when you mentioned employee experience before, you really talked about it from a point of view of the concierge service, right? Of welcoming someone in the organization and making sure that they know where everything is and the best restaurants are. Is that what it covers, or is there way more? Let's say, for example, if I'm new into a remote workplace, does the employee experience is something that you also design for someone who's been there for, I don't know, 2 years or something like that?
Yeah, so it definitely does not end at the welcome. The way that I would describe it is all the way from hire to retire. And that includes alumni groups. It includes, college recruiting at the beginning. It is a span I believe, should span from before you get the role and are interested in the company to the day that you choose to leave. And there's a lot of support that really comes with that. And that's why I really believe in a strong people team that really kind of supports that holistic and ecosystem. One thing that I have loved thinking about is I look at marketing teams a lot and how many teams will map the customer experience, right? You want this customer to feel these 3 things at the sales process. You want them to feel these 3 things at when they sign the deal, or whatever that might be. And I really like to mirror that from an employee experience. What do I want people to say, feel, think, and do at every touch point, every moment of truth? So is that the first day that they're interested in the company, to their first call with the recruiter, to the signing the papers, to the baton handoff to the onboarder, to 3 months into onboarding, to 2 years down the road when they might be having a child, or might be wanting to really learn a new skill set, and learning and development programs, everything kind of across the board is really wrapped into that employee support. And I think that something, especially in a remote environment, is it can be really overwhelming if you have a certain skill set where you might not be a super social person and you might not be incredibly self-service. Being able to have a team that is there to kind of cut the fat, basically, of a lot of the kind of the complicated traditional HR things can feel so supportive. So your mind is really freed to then focus on your work instead of having to figure out a whole nother piece of the business.
Yeah, and this is true, actually. I mean, one thing I've seen, or I've heard quite a lot in organization, is that those who are quiet in a remote world just disappear because people don't really know what they want, and there's not a lot of focus on their experience, right? Their experience in the organization. But I guess, what do you see as a challenge for companies, regardless of the size, whether small or big? What do you think is the challenge for companies in adopting this idea of designing an employee experience?
I think it's a huge, huge shift for most companies to start thinking about focusing on the experience at an equal level than that they're focusing on the product. And I think they should. There's a mutual value proposition in that. It also costs 3 times an employee's salary for them to leave or for you to fire them. So it's expensive to not invest in it. And I don't know if it's simply going to take kind of the drawn out length of however long this great resignation and reshuffle is going to last. I think we have a few more years of it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really, really just feel I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
It's all right. Don't worry. You're talking about the shift, but why people don't really focus on
Oh, yes.
the
Yeah.
creating
And I think in a lot of ways, yeah, people just aren't privy to the fact of how successful it can be to have a tenured employee and to really invest in their employees. I think we focus so much on kind of that shareholder, that the customer, that we need to be equalizing the playing field with a stakeholder mindset. So we're creating a longevity system where everyone is helping one another. And that means an equal investment in our customers, in our employees, in our shareholders, in our environment, in our communities.
Yeah, and in fact, I see that quite a lot in the startups world. Of course, there's a lot of challenges in terms of the amount of money they might have available. But at the same time, as you've said, replacing someone from your team is actually quite expensive. And it's better to be more proactive than to wait for someone to hand in their resignation and then like, oh, by the way, we can do X, Y, Z for you. So how can you help, for example, startups, founders that are just about to hire 10, they just got some funding, they're about to hire 10 people in their teams without any kind of focused HR, employee experience, culture, or any of those kind of things?
Hire one now. I mean, my biggest piece of advice is get your executive people person in now, or somebody who has an acumen for understanding sociology, anthropology, and psychology, and how to really design an environment of belonging through language and being able to translate the feeling of the founder and that founder's mission and that company's mission to magnetize the right people into that company.
Yeah, definitely. Hire one now and just don't hold back. Most of the time is quite funny because I think I saw a couple of posts this last week on LinkedIn that talked about something similar where it's all about the growth, and a lot of startups love to publicize, especially ones that got investments and they're growing like crazy. But I always want to find out the stories, right? When the people arrive in the company and there's literally no procedures, there's no employee experience, there's no concierge service, and they don't even know in which room they're gonna go and sleep, right?
Yeah, the way I've described it is, I mean, every remote culture is a different ecosystem, right? And if you don't tell me what ecosystem I'm coming into, I don't know if I need to pack a bikini. I don't know if I need to pack a giant puffy jacket because I don't know if it's cold in here, if it's warm in here. Right? I don't understand that unless it's written down and described to me.
Yeah. So one question that came up, especially when you start looking at the how do I want people to feel in my organization, there was a question on LinkedIn earlier. I will let you try that word. I think Naomi, if you can put it up for us. And it was quite interesting to start understanding a little bit about this idea of well-being and employee experience in general, or the future of work. So what is eudaimic? Eudaimonic? Well, eudaimonic, right? There you go.
Yeah.
What is eudaimonic well-being, and how do flexible workplaces enable this for people?
Yeah, so eudaimonic well-being is a concept in positive psychology, as well as a Greek philosophy, that basically achieving eudaimonia is really not achieving happiness. It's achieving a life well lived and a life that was full of meaning. And the difference between eudaimonia and hedonic well-being, or eudaimonia and happiness, or what's in between that is pain. And I think really creating a culture that understands the reality of life and the different experiences that we all have, and flexible workplaces understanding that, right? And being very real, especially if the last 2 years, it's been longer than that. It's just been 2 years, right? Somehow,
Yes.
yeah, okay, cool. Yeah.
2 long years, should we say?
If we've learned anything from that, it's that we're all human and we all have hardships. And that doesn't mean that workplaces are focused on that, but the flexibility in providing benefits and an environment that really supports kind of just the reality of being human and that
Mm,
work life harmony. We are so much more integrated, and we are heading into a so much more integrated society in kind of what you are is what you do. Not always, but for many companies and for many people who are kind of working in this remote environment, and that we're starting to flow much more.
mm,
And there's a lot of really positive things that come with that: authentic leadership, people being able to
mm.
really show up
Yeah.
as who they are in the environment that supports them the best that it does. And I think building workplaces around the reality of being human and really, really targeting processes for meaning and making sure we're hiring people in the right roles and reshuffling if they aren't in the right roles and they don't feel energized and meaning from
Mm.
their work, we're going to be able to get, we're going to be a lot more successful as companies and as a society if we really start to invest in kind of that goal of, eudaimonia and a life well lived.
This is beautiful, and I see that as the workplace playground, really, because I
Yeah.
believe that because a lot whenever I talk about this idea of playgrounds, a lot of people think it's this place where we just go and play and do whatever you want. But there's quite a lot of correlation with what you said earlier. This idea of if I know what is expected of me, if I know what I need to do, I know what the boundaries are, I know where I need to go and ask for help, I know where my room is in my concierge service, then all I have to do is focus on what I need to do. And it's taking so much headaches away from people, and it makes me more productive. And I guess this is something I wish that many more organizations really could spend, even leaders, right, spend some time to really look at how they are bringing this aspect of well-being and enabling that for their people.
Absolutely. And I would say when you say playground, a thought came to mind is, and knowing that it's okay if you fall off the monkey bars, that like
Yes.
it's safe to fail, and you know where the nurse's station is, or you know where the band-aids are, so you can band yourself up and pick back up, and your team is there for you. And so I think that safe to fail piece within the
Yeah.
playground and the framework is really important as well.
Yeah. And I think, especially when you look at startups and this world of innovation, which is another, or my third question I've got for you, I believe that being able to fail and knowing that you have the support to get back up quickly and continue in your journey to innovation is this safety net that might not be available in other organizations.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as I've already introduced the startups and the innovation, one of the things that comes across a lot, there's this, I wouldn't say it is people fighting in terms of thoughts, but I see a lot this idea of a remote hybrid, but especially a remote workplace is not the right environment for a startup to grow, because there's a lot of innovation and brainstorming and this kind of thing that needs to happen. And apparently, the communication flows much better when you are face to face. What do you think about that?
I think it's BS.
Tell it like it is. I love that. Well,
I just do. I don't know. I can understand. I mean, I do believe that getting together in person is important for teams, but I really think that time should strictly be spent on trust building and getting to know one another and building relationships. And when it comes to innovation, I can't imagine a better playground than a remote environment. And I say that as somebody who helped build a fully remote company starting in 2018. There were no resources for remote, or very few, and there were a lot of things we were all kind of trying to figure out how to do together. And when you don't have a lot or a roadmap, or when I don't mean an internal roadmap, but like a guide helping guide you. This is how we've done it before. It is a completely blue ocean space for innovation. How are we going to do this? Can we try this and did it fail? And talking to people, did it work here? And I think almost removing the office forces our brains to be so much more innovative than we would have had to if we were in a box. And I'm going to kind of use a quick example here, if this is
Yeah,
okay.
go for it.
It's a little different.
Go for it.
There is a boy, they call him Bat Boy, and it's a podcast on NPR. And he was born blind, and his mother said, "I'm never going to send you to a school for the blind. You're not gonna have blind be a disability for being blind be a disability for you." And so he was allowed to ride his bike down the street. He would break his arm all the time, and he taught himself sonar, and he taught himself how to go through the world because he'd never put a label on himself. No one had ever put a label on him. And I look at remote, and a lot of people that come into a remote environment that have been labeled in the past because of their job title or because of the box that they have been put in, because of their disability or whatever it might be. And then they come into this remote environment, and we have this opportunity to just wipe that slate clean, remove kind of those kind of boxes we put people in, and create these environments that are just ripe for innovation, opportunity, and belonging.
Yeah, no, that's true. I think sometimes it's kind of feel like we are stuck in this one way of working that probably was never working for us really well anyway, but we've never really questioned it, and changing it is quite painful. So yeah, the funny thing is, I've worked with a lot of startups, and especially throughout the pandemic, most of the companies I work with and the product that we were building, well, I've never actually seen my team face to face, but we have great relationships. And in fact, one thing that always strikes me as odd whenever we start talking about this idea of innovation only being available face to face, there are many companies pre-COVID, right? VC. Those companies used to have people all over the world in different
Yeah,
departments. This managed to work and innovate, right? So what is the big
totally.
difference here with what's happening right now?
So many distributed companies out there that have been so successful over the years with their global teams and with kind of that ability to work across borders and come up with amazing solutions with technology. And yeah, I don't see much difference now.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we have quite a lot of people watching tonight, which is quite exciting. So if you have any questions out there, please, this is your moment. We've got Darcy with us. This way I don't have to send her an email and says, by the way, because this question that came in online. So please go ahead and share your questions or your thoughts, or if you just say hi, that would be nice. So one of the things that I also want to look at, especially when we start talking about, again, bringing this idea of employee experience to startups. If I'm a startup founder watching this right now and thinking, wow, yes, this is something that I put my hands up, I brought a lot of people in my company, but I haven't really done the homework. Apart from the basics, yes, they've got a contract, right? I'm really talking about the proper concierge experience that you've described at the beginning of the show. What are some key 3 practical tips that they can just very quickly, even if it's just touching the surface, what are 3 things that they can do straight away to start improving the culture of their company?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing, and this is kind of going back to basics, is define your values. What are your values? What is that North Star? And can you come back to these values, even if it's just 3 or 4 for right now? But what is really intrinsically motivating for you? And just understanding why the company that you built, like, why does the company that you built exist? And making sure that's the heart of everything you design. Number one, I would say that is absolutely number one thing. I'd say number two is if you do not have an onboarding program or somebody managing your onboarding program that's remote first, even if you're hybrid, even if you have an office, your remote onboarding should be designed fully remote first. If it's not designed remote first, you're going to have a lot of people that are left behind, and you just don't want to kind of fall into that camp of location bias. And I would also say number 3 is within your onboarding like program design is batch your hiring. Make sure that those people that are coming in together, so whether you've got 10 people coming in one week, or maybe it's 2 and they're on different teams, actually it's scalable to batch your hiring, but also you can create community with those people that are actually going through onboarding together at the same time, and really holding that container for them to not only build relationships that matter, but to also really create that connection and have people feel like they've got kind of that hug around them. They're not going through this by themselves.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting point, because a lot of people sometimes, especially companies, might want to bring 1 or 2 people from different departments, but they don't batch their hiring, and they lose the opportunity of creating that community, especially even if they might not be in the same team, but you can connect them and create that experience, right?
Yeah, and I'm going to harp on onboarding a lot kind of for those 3 things. You only have a certain amount of that really deep kind of curiosity and interest right at that beginning, where people are just discovering. It's like, again, you're going to a new city, you're going to the hotel, you have this moment to show people what the lounge looks like, where the restaurants are, and take that opportunity to really, really get to know the people that you've hired on, and they want to get to know you as well. And I think even if it means making onboarding a 2-week process or a 3-week process, you won't be upset that you invested this time up front a year or 2 down the road.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes especially in fast-paced environments, it's really about seeing the results now, that we forget what you can get, what you can achieve 2 years down the line by doing the things the right way at the beginning. Now, one slightly controversial question, depending on who you are and where you stand. How do you define hybrid versus remote working? Because there's so many times where I've seen a remote job being advertised as being remote as long as you are in the office every Friday.
Yeah. I don't think I can answer that question fully clearly right now until we get some sort of definition in Merriam-Webster that defines this, because there's a lot of different definitions of what hybrid means, what remote means. My definition of remote, I would say about a 70% asynchronous and a 30% synchronous environment. Really just leaning more heavy in that asynchronous. So again, you've got that freedom and flexibility around those meeting times, around the times that it is essential to be on calls. It is essential to be connecting. It is essential to be customer facing. I think hybrid gets really tricky. It depends on, are you hybrid and you have an office first operating system? Are you hybrid and you have a remote first operating system? Are you hybrid and only some people have to come into the office? And I think that's where we get into, frankly, an environment of inequality and location bias. And I think we talk so much about distributed work being results driven, and you really need to set the expectations. And if things are all over the place, there's no way to set an expectation for everybody. So I think it comes back to that first question you asked me, is defining it. Which way are you going to go? Make the decision and then start designing around it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's I think sometimes, I think in one of the interviews that we had in the past, we are so caught up on the terminology that we are forgetting and losing the opportunity to reimagine what the workplace should be. Like you said earlier today, was this idea of, first, what are your values and how do you bring that as part of the journey and employee branding and all of that. It's just about how many days I'm in the office then, how many days I'm not in the office.
And that's okay. If you want employees 3 days in the office, then create a word for your company that defines that, or make sure that that's, again, in your employer branding material. It's on your job descriptions. It's the red thread of the experience that you want people to have. Whatever that is okay, but make sure you're writing it down and that people understand those expectations, because they'll choose the role based on what works for them and vice versa.
Yeah, definitely. So far, we've looked a lot at employee experience, especially when it comes to designing the first part. But I wanted to look at the middle part, something that you've mentioned. And thanks to Brigitte for the message. Hi, lovely to have you on the show today. And I wanted to ask you a question on something that's I hope I hope it's going to happen a lot this year. Is companies that have been remote or going remote for the first time or going hybrid for the first time are now thinking about bringing their people together. Some of them who have been working together for a while but never met each other, they are thinking about walking their structure as part of their employee experience for face-to-face 1 week or 1 day or something like that. Do you have any advice on what to do and what not to do when it comes to bringing your people together, especially if they are not going to be together for a long period of time?
Yeah. Bringing remote teams together when I first started doing it in 2018 was very different than any other kind of event that I had ever planned. And so something I would say not to do is design an event that you think like an in-person event that you would have done in the office. I think when you bring people together, and here's an example, you've got somebody in New York City who understands traveling, gets the public transportation system, has access to all different types of food. They have a little bit different of an understanding of how to behave when getting on a plane and going to a centralized location. You might have somebody from a very rural area who's never been on a plane before, that has only had access to one type of food or whatever that might be, right? They just aren't necessarily as privy to the outside world aside from the company culture than some of the other employees might be. So I really think equalizing that playing field and thinking about belonging when you are creating that environment. Another thing I would say to do is I actually, when I was planning events for remote teams, I would specifically choose locations that had physical architecture that would force people to run into one another. You want spaces where people have long brunch lines because you want them to talk. You want spaces that also have, retreat areas for people that might not be super social, that you really need to cater to the introverts as well. Scheduling in a lot of breaks. When you're doing these events, you also really, really want to stray away from a lot of heavy content. If you're bringing people in together, spend that time building relationships and getting people energized for the next 6 months or the next year or however it might be in between you're seeing one another again. So again, ask your question, what do you want people to say, feel, think, and do? And really design for those synchronous connections.
Yeah. And I love that. Do you mind repeating the question again? What do you want people to say, think,
feel, and do?
Feel and do. Yes, I love that. That's a really nice way of summarizing that. One of the things that I've seen a lot is that, one of the comments that you've made is to make sure that there's time for connections, because I sometimes see the agenda is packed full of brainstorming and planning and dealing with these issues for the next 6 hours, and then we go for maybe dinner if you like it until you fly back.
I mean, honestly, I've heard feedback from fellow teammates before. Is the best moments are the moments during long brunch, and the best moments are kind of running into each other in the elevator, and the best moments are kind of, after dinner at the hotel bar, or maybe just going for a walk with somebody. And those are the moments that we cannot recreate in a virtual environment. I don't believe there's a solution for them in a virtual environment. So why not spend that time that you're investing to be together on those magical moments? And when you design them right and when it comes together, I can tell you it's magic.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Is there a recommended number of times you think that remote teams needs to meet? I mean, face to face
Yeah,
to create those connections.
I think it heavily depends on how large your team is and how fast you're growing. I My druthers would be about twice a year for all company, but that's really under a company of around 250. It's really hard to do, twice a year for over 250 employees. But another thing you can do is maybe you have one all company team offsite a year, and the rest of the year there's mini offsites for kind of the sales team and the marketing team and the customer service team and the people team, whatever that might be, and grouping those teams together. So again, you can get really creative. I would say no less than one and probably no more than three.
Okay. So no less than one, no more than three. But of course, if you wanted to do more, like you said, you can have smaller groups of people within the team that wanted to meet somewhere.
Absolutely. And start thinking about things you could do with, people in your company when there's a marketing conference and you have most of the marketing team that has to be at that conference already in person. Is there a way to maybe invite some support people as well to understand the marketing process a little better and create those relationships? Starting to really make sure, and again, that intentional design around not siloing teams to make sure that we all understand the inner workings as much as possible of the business, of one another's roles, so we can help one another out with the skill set and the role that you're in.
Yeah, that's very interesting because I think it's something that can even be applied for traditional face-to-face roles as well, because a lot of offsites tends to be based on a team rather than being cross-functional. So people don't
Yeah.
really understand what the other teams are doing or why they do things a certain way.
Yeah. I mean, you can do anything. Anything is possible. It's just about thinking about what you want your results to be.
Yes, definitely. And one thing, and just to kind of get to know you a little bit more, you mentioned earlier that you love traveling and things like that. Do you believe that, or do you want to share with us how remote work has helped you center yourself a lot more into bringing your own well-being, your dreams, your goals into your work?
Oh my God. It has completely and utterly changed my life. I am such a happier person now than I was when I had to be in an office. And I think that part of that and part of remote being able to support my lifestyle and so many other people's lifestyle. And I want to be careful because, I, I don't have kids. I don't have a lot of family responsibilities. So I do have the luxury of having a little bit more freedom. But I also, with that, remote work has given me the opportunity to volunteer more in my community. My dog is a therapy dog, and to really work with her in schools and to really do the things that fill my cup so I can show up to work when I log in full, ready, energized, ready to put the output that I have been assigned and what the projects that I'm working on. And there are so many people who have such similar but such different reasons for working remotely, whether it's children at home or a sick mother or religion or disability or just because they want to and they love to cook. I mean, the amount of people that work remotely, and I would love to see a current statistic on this, that I have met that have dietary restrictions specifically because they can now have the ability to cook at home and they have the ability to really take care of their bodies, is such an incredible thing. And it has completely changed my outlook on life. I, was having a really hard time with depression before I was working remotely, and substance abuse and a lot of different things, just because I felt like I couldn't. It felt so constricted because I had to be certain places on certain times, even if I wasn't, having to do the work. I just had to be there, and I didn't understand why I couldn't take care of myself when I needed to. And now that those chains are removed and that I've been able to have their permission and be in a culture and kind of have people like you, Nayli, and people in our community who are really leading the way to saying it doesn't have to suck. It doesn't have to be like this. Let's create a better world for everyone, our customers, our employees, everyone. I'm on that train, and I can't even begin to express like how much my life has changed for the better, and the people around me as well.
Yes, yeah, I agree. I agree. And it was actually beautiful to see how you're literally glowing as you're describing the change of your life. And I believe that that same energy that you are getting, as you've said, is something that you still bring back to whatever company that you are working for. And sadly, I think many companies are missing out of this extra energy, this extra glow that people have when they are too constrained and stuck in ways that do not offer flexibility. And as Darcy's mentioned so many times on this show, flexibility is pretty much based on what you want it to be and what you can offer, as long as you also think about designing a full employee experience, support your people.
Supports your people, and it can still, and I think this is the one thing people miss a lot when they hear these types of conversations, it can still support your product and your customers.
Yeah.
It really can, even to a higher level than previously before. And so I think that that's a really important thing not to miss. And it's not all footloose and fancy free. It's a framework, and then defining that, and then you get to choose that freedom within it.
But then how would you do that? Then how would you use that or define that framework for the customers and the products part?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's really just about putting those swim lanes in, right? So I want to know as a customer, at least I'm the type of customer that wants to be talking to a customer service agent who is energized, who is able to help me, who has the resources and the autonomy to not have to ask their manager or if they can do something, right? They have kind of that autonomy. We're all adults. And so I think it really comes down to what is the autonomy within the environment that you're creating?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, no, it does, because I guess it's a nice way of seeing how further, how the importance of this idea of improving your well-being, giving me more flexibility, so that I can not just be more effective, but it goes way beyond to your product, to your customers, to your bottom line, and all of that aspects that especially leaders love to look at as well. Now, as we are getting towards the end of our show, I've got one more question to also finish off on the employee experience. This is a topic that we've talked quite a lot in addition to just the future of work. We really started all the way from the beginning when it comes to how would you design that, what you need to bear in mind. If you've missed any of that good stuff, I would suggest you go back and watch the video. We looked at the onboarding process. We looked at how when you bring your people together and what they are in your company, what you can do to continuing growing and refining their experience. But one of the things that I'd like to touch upon as well is, again, it's not something that I've seen a lot out there on LinkedIn. So I thought, I've got Darcy, I may as well ask her. So when we start looking at the ending journey, I'm not talking necessarily retirement, but someone leaving or exiting the company, is there anything that you will suggest as part of this employee experience, or does it not really apply to that particular scenario?
Oh, I think it absolutely applies to that scenario. I mean, I'll use the words of Patty McCord, who was the VP of People at Netflix for a very long time. Create a workplace that's a great place to be from, and make sure that those people are leaving with kind of that wanting to speak highly of the place that they've come from, and vice versa. And I think a few just kind of tactical things that to really wrap up that ending process, or the end of that, perhaps that chapter in that person's life and your chapter as a company with them, is exit interviews. Exit interviews are so important, and starting to see the threads. Why are people leaving? So you can really start to capture that data, I think, is really, really important. I also think just making sure that they have the resources to know, this might sound, again, very tactical and very small, how to log into their accounts for their W-2s the next year. What is that offboarding checklist? Can you give them a little package with a little bow to say, here's the email that you can contact, if you've forgotten this or need anything? That relationship has ended, but you've been there for a certain period of time. It doesn't have to be super hands-on. The investment only takes once to build kind of that checklist, and then you can repeat it for every employee. So I think really investing that time in the goodbye, the wrap up, and the send off is really important. And then when companies get to a very large stage, creating that alumni network, because a lot of people were hired because they were really smart. They share the same values. They have very similar outlooks on what the product should be or how to create the customer. I mean, I have seen incredible businesses be formed based on alumni networks in the past. So starting to think about investing in an alumni network could be really successful.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I never really thought about this idea of alumni network of people who have left the company. But having said that, one of the whether it was a network or not, but similar, one of the companies I left, I used to work for, one thing that I loved about the culture there was that you're part of the family. There was a lot of arguments in meetings, but as soon as the meetings are over, we go to the pub and have lunch and drink because we knew that the arguments were positive. They were there for make sure that we have the right products. I've left that company for more than 4 or 5 years now, or even more, but they still invite me to the Christmas dinner. And I guess when you're talking about the alumni network, right, this is something very simple that they've created where people who leave still have that feeling of being part of the culture. And whenever they have an opening, if I know someone, I'm happy to recommend them to work there.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you've worked with them before and they have a skill set, and LinkedIn can be great for that as well. But being able to kind of wrap that, even branded with certain companies around that kind of environment, can be really positive.
Yeah, definitely. So thanks again, Brigitte, for your message, which is thank you very much. I hope this show will help a lot of people. And I do too, especially when whether you are a startup or not, there's so many things that Darcy's covered that can help you think about how you're structuring your company going forward. And as you said, Darcy, really early at the beginning, you need to make a decision because indecision is actually hurting people even more. Now, as a final question, how if you had a magic wand to could see in the future, when it comes yes, when it comes to the future of work, what do you see?
Oh, I'm an eternal optimist. Um,
Let's go
so
for
sorry,
it.
not sorry. Uh, Thriving employees who are really able to invest in themselves, therefore being at their best when they are on and working for the companies that they're working for. I see teams that are much more diverse and able to tackle harder problems because of the diversity of thought and experience that we're now able to build and the skill sets that we're able to have access to. I see solving for a lot of problems because we're now being able to shift our mindsets out of kind of how things have been, and now we can think how things could be and asking those questions. I truly see a better world with people who are really, really able to increase their skill set, people who might not have had access to opportunities before as well. And I see stronger relationships and I see more cultural understanding. And I'm here for it. I'm really excited.
Yes, I am too. And honestly, your vision makes me want to just jump up and down right now because that's the kind of world I want to live in, right? That's the kind of company that I want to work for. And I believe, and I really hope that your vision will come well to fruition. And I believe that we are also in the going along the right path. As I've mentioned at the beginning of the show, it took about 20 to 25 years for people to move from horses to cars and eventually realize that, you know what, we can do it. And I hope that the same will happen when we start talking about the future of work. Thank you all for watching this show. It was amazing. And again, thank you, Darcy, for being on tonight. I was really, really excited to have you as my guest today.
Thank you so much. This was awesome. It was so good to spend some time with you.
Likewise. And for everybody else, well, remember, let's design a happy and productive workplace playground together.